Some stories find us when we least expect them. This one found me on a dusty Texas road, and I believe it found its way to you for a reason. What you're about to read isn't about heroes or miracles. It's about something simpler and perhaps more honest. Two broken souls who stumbled upon each other when the world had given up on both. I've learned that the things worth keeping are often the things others throw away. A worn Bible, a handwritten letter, a dog nobody wanted. This story is for anyone who's ever felt invisible. For anyone who's been told they're too old, too damaged, or too far gone to matter. For anyone who's ever looked in the mirror and wondered if their best days are behind them. They're not. Trust me on this one. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering every few seconds with that tired, dying rhythm. The smell hit Michael first bleach and wet fur and something underneath it all. Something sad. Somewhere in the back. A dog barked twice, then fell silent. Michael Thompson stood at the counter, the cardboard box heavy in his arms. Couldn't weigh more than 3 or 4 pounds. Shouldn't feel this heavy. But it did. The woman behind the desk hadn't looked up once. Gray hair pulled tight in a bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, fingers tapping at a keyboard, eyes fixed on the computer screen like it held all the answers in the world. "Ma'am, I found this dog out by the old railroad. We don't take that. That. Not him. Not the dog. That." Michael's jaw tightened. "You haven't even looked." The woman finally raised her head. 60 years of shelter work lived in those tired eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. She glanced at the box. 1 second, 2, her face didn't change. Not a flicker. "Sir, I've been doing this since Nixon was in office. I know what I'm looking at." She turned back to her screen. "We don't have room for hopeless cases." Hopeless. The word hung in the stale air between them, mixing with the smell of disinfectant and despair. Michael looked down into the box. The creature inside barely resembled a dog anymore. Skin stretched over bones like canvas over a frame. Patches of raw, red flesh where fur should have been. Scars crisscrossing what remained of its face, old wounds. Healed badly, telling stories Michael didn't want to imagine. One ear was half gone, torn, not cut, ragged at the edges, but the eyes were still there, brown, deep, looking up at him through all that ruin, not begging, not hoping, just watching. Patient, like it had heard the word no so many times. It had stopped expecting anything different. Michael's throat went dry. This was the 5th shelter, the 5th no, the 5th door closing in his face. He thought about the railroad tracks, the tall grass baking under the Texas sun, the cicadas screaming in the heat. How easy it would have been to keep walking that afternoon. He almost had. Lord knows, he almost had. "Well, I'll be..." "Now what?" The dog blinked slowly. Its breathing was shallow, ragged, a wet rattle somewhere deep in its chest, like something broken that couldn't be fixed. It was dying. Anyone with eyes could see that. But it was still here, still breathing, still looking up at him with those quiet, patient eyes, waiting to see what he would do next. Michael turned and walked out of the shelter without another word. The glass door swung shut behind him with a soft whoosh. The Texas sun hit him like a wall, hot, unforgiving. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the parking lot asphalt. He stood there, box in his arms, sweat already beading on his forehead. The cicadas sang their endless summer song from the trees lining the lot. Behind him, the shelter's air conditioning hummed through the walls. Inside, dozens of dogs waited in cages. Healthy dogs. Pretty dogs. Dogs people actually wanted. Ahead of him, Nothing but highway and dust and a decision he wasn't ready to make. The dog shifted in the box. A small sound, not a whimper, not a cry, just movement. A reminder that it was still there. Still alive. For now. They say the measure of a person isn't what they do. When the world is watching, it's what they do when nobody else cares. If this story found you today, we'd be honored to know where you're watching from. The drive home took 40 minutes, should have taken 30, but Michael avoided the hospital route. Always did. Didn't matter that it added time. Some roads weren't worth taking. His truck rattled over the potholes a 2008 F-150 with rust creeping up from the wheel wells like slow disease. The AC had quit 2 summers ago. Hot air blew through the open windows, carrying the smell of dry grass and diesel from the highway. The box sat on the passenger seat. No movement. No sound except that wet rattle of breathing. Michael kept his eyes on the road. Cedar Creek wasn't much of a town. A gas station. A grocery store. Bucky's Diner where the old-timers gathered for coffee and gossip every morning. 3 churches, 2 Baptist, 1 Methodist, and 2 bars. The kind of place people passed through on their way to somewhere better. He turned onto Mulberry Lane. Mobile homes lined both sides, spaced far enough apart to pretend at privacy. His sat at the end faded blue siding. Wooden steps his father had built 30 years ago. A screen door that creaked no matter how much WD-40 he sprayed on the hinges. Home. The word felt wrong these days. Inside. The air hung stale and warm. He'd left the blinds closed that morning. A window unit hummed in the bedroom, fighting a losing battle against the Texas heat. Michael set the box on the kitchen floor, stood there, looked around. The fridge hummed in the corner. A wall clock ticked above the stove. Linda's clock, the one with the rooster on the face. Inside the fridge, half a carton of eggs, milk 2 days from expiring, 4 cans of Lone Star, the sum total of his provisions, on the TV stand. A picture frame lay face down. 8 years of dust had gathered around its edges like snow that never melted. He didn't look at it, never did. But he didn't throw it away either. A country station played low from the radio on the counter. Hank Williams, Jr., singing about whiskey and heartache. Michael had stopped hearing it years ago. Just background noise now, something to fill the silence. The dog made a sound. Small, barely there. Michael crouched down, knees popping. The cardboard smelled like wet earth and something else infection. Maybe sickness. The dog's eyes were open, watching him. "I don't know what I'm doing here," Michael said out loud. His voice sounded strange in the quiet house, rusty from disuse. The dog blinked. "I don't even like dogs." No response, just that steady, patient gaze. Michael stood, walked to the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer. There it sat, a wedding band, white gold, delicate, not his. His fingers hovered over it for a long moment. Then he closed the drawer. When he returned to the kitchen, the dog hadn't moved, but something in those brown eyes had shifted. A question. What happens now? 3 days earlier, Saturday afternoon. The Texas sun sat high and mean in a white sky, pressing down on everything below like a hot iron. Michael walked the old railroad tracks, boots crunching on gravel and dead weeds. Nobody came out here anymore. That was the point. The rails hadn't seen a train in 20 years. Rust had eaten through the steel, turning it orange and brown. Wooden ties rotted into the earth, soft as wet cardboard. The town had moved on, left this stretch of track to the grass and the silence and the cicadas screaming their endless summer song. Michael liked the silence, what was left of it. Anyway, no neighbors waving from porches, no small talk at the gas station. Just him and the empty sky and the rhythm of his own footsteps. He'd been walking these tracks every Saturday since Linda passed. 8 years of Saturdays. 8 years of this same path, this same heat, the same nothing. A sound stopped him. Low, weak, coming from the tall grass to his right. Michael kept walking. Not his business. Probably a raccoon gone bad. Maybe a possum. Things died out here all the time. Circle of life and all that. But the sound followed him. Not following. Exactly. Just continuing. A thin, wet noise. Breathing that didn't want to be breathing anymore. He walked another 10 steps. The cicadas roared. Sweat trickled down his neck, soaking into his collar. Stopped, turned around. The grass stood waist high, brown and brittle from weeks without rain. Michael pushed through it, thorns catching on his jeans, grasshoppers scattering at his feet in small explosions of green. The smell hit him first. Rotting flesh. Infection. The sweet, sick stench of something dying slowly in the heat. Then he saw it. A dog. Or what remained of one. It lay in a shallow depression, pressed flat against the earth like it was trying to disappear into the ground itself. Ribs jutted through patchy skin. Raw sores wept fluid where fur had fallen away in clumps. Scars covered its face, dozens of them, layered over each other, old wounds that had healed wrong and ugly. One ear was half missing, torn at the edge, ragged, the dog's head lifted. Slowly, the effort visible in every trembling muscle, brown eyes found Michael's face. No bark, no growl, no tail wag, nothing. Just those eyes, looking up at him, waiting. Michael had seen plenty of dying things in his 52 years, cattle, deer, his father in that hospital bed, tubes running everywhere, machines beeping their steady countdown, Linda in the same bed 3 years later, her hand going slack in his. But he'd never seen anything look at him quite like this. Not asking for help, not begging for mercy, just acknowledging, like the dog understood exactly what it was looking at. A man who could walk away, a man who probably would. Michael's boots felt heavy. He should go. Call animal control if it bothered him that much. Let someone else handle this mess. The dog's head lowered back to the ground. Eyes still open, still watching, waiting for him to leave. Michael turned, took a step toward the tracks. The cicadas screamed louder, filling the silence he left behind. The breathing continued, that wet, rattling sound, in and out, in and out. He took another step, Linda's voice, somewhere in his memory. "You're better than you think you are. Michael, I just wish you'd believe it." He stopped, his hands curled into fists at his sides. Ah, to heck with it. He pulled off his flannel shirt and crouched down in the grass. The dog didn't flinch when he touched it, didn't snap, didn't even tense up. It weighed nothing, bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. Michael lifted it like a bundle of kindling. The dog's eyes closed. Not in fear, not in relief. Just closed, like it had done this before, been picked up, moved, dropped somewhere else. Michael carried it back toward the tracks, toward the road, toward his truck parked a quarter-mile away. The heat bore down. Sweat dripped into his eyes. With each step, he asked himself what he was doing. He had no answer. The dog's heartbeat pressed against his chest through the flannel. Faint but steady, faster than he expected. Still fighting, after everything. Still fighting. When he reached his truck and laid the dog on the passenger seat, its eyes opened again, looking at him, that same question he couldn't read. Michael slammed the door, stood in the dust, breathing hard. Now what? He had no idea. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a darker thought surfaced. What if nobody wanted it? The shelters blurred together after the first two. Different buildings, different faces behind different desks. Same answer. Monday morning, Michael drove 40 miles to the Pinewood Animal Rescue. A young woman in green scrubs took one look at the box and stepped backward, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "I need to get my supervisor." She disappeared through a swinging door. The clock on the wall ticked. 10 minutes passed. 15. When she returned, her supervisor wasn't with her. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have the resources for a case like this." Michael picked up the box and left without a word. The second shelter sat on the outskirts of a strip mall, wedged between a nail salon and a vacant storefront. The man behind the counter wore a polo shirt with the shelter's logo stitched over the pocket. He leaned forward, peered into the box, and his nose wrinkled. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. The kindest thing would be to let it go. We can recommend a vet who handles these situations. Low cost. That's not what I'm asking for." The man shrugged. "Then I can't help you." Shelter 3 didn't even open the door. Through the glass, Michael watched a woman in the back shake her head and turn away. The closed sign hung crooked in the window. Shelter 4, a cramped office that smelled like bleach and kibble and too many animals in too small a space. The intake coordinator, a heavy woman with kind eyes and tired hands, actually reached into the box. Her fingers brushed the dog's matted fur. "German Shepherd," she murmured. "Or used to be. Can you take him?" She pulled her hand back, wiped it on her jeans. Something in her face shifted pity mixed with resignation. "We only accept dogs with adoption potential. Nobody's going to adopt this." "Honey, nobody." And then Shelter 5, the last one, on Michael's list. The biggest facility in 3 counties, an hour's drive from Cedar Creek. He already knew the answer before the gray-haired woman behind the desk opened her mouth. "We don't take that." Michael stood in the parking lot afterward, the box growing heavier in his arms. The afternoon sun beat down on his neck. Sweat soaked through the back of his shirt. 5 doors, 5 rejections. 5 strangers who looked at this creature and saw nothing worth saving. The dog hadn't made a sound through any of it. Just lay in the box, breathing that wet, rattled breath, watching Michael with those patient brown eyes. He put the box in the truck, sat behind the wheel, didn't start the engine. His phone sat in the cup holder. He could call animal control. They'd come pick it up, handle the situation, and by handle, he knew exactly what they meant. His thumb hovered over the screen. The dog coughed, a deep, liquid sound. Something was wrong inside those lungs. Michael started the truck. He didn't call animal control. Dr. Miller's clinic sat at the end of Oak Street, a squat brick building with a faded sign and a parking lot full of cracks. Michael had driven past it 1,000 times, never had a reason to stop. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and wet dog. A cat yowled somewhere in the back. Michael carried the box to the front desk, and the receptionist, a woman about his age with reading glasses and worried eyes, looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." She glanced at the box. Her expression shifted. "Let me get Dr. Miller." The vet was older than Michael expected, late 60s, maybe early 70s, white coat over a flannel shirt. Hands steady despite the years as he lifted the dog onto the cold metal table. He didn't speak for a long time, just examined, probed, listened with his stethoscope, moving it slowly across the thin chest. His face showed nothing. Finally, he straightened up, removed his gloves with 2 quick snaps. "Well," Michael waited. "Demodex mange. Severe. Spread across the whole body." Dr. Miller's voice was flat, clinical. Malnutrition lost at least 40% of body weight. Respiratory infection. Sounds like pneumonia setting in, and there's a mass in the abdomen. He paused. Don't look good. The words landed heavy, one after another. How long does he have? Few weeks, maybe less. The vet looked at Michael over the rims of his glasses. This dog should be dead already. Mr. Thompson, most animals quit long before it gets this bad. This one's still hanging on. Lord knows why. Silence filled the small room. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. What are my options? Dr. Miller's eyebrows rose slightly. You want to treat it? I asked what my options are. The vet studied him for a moment, then nodded once, slow. Option 1. Humane euthanasia. Quick, painless, no charge. Michael's jaw tightened. Option 2. Aggressive treatment. Medication for the mange. Antibiotics for the infection. Special diet. We monitor that tumor, see what happens. He paused. $2,000 minimum, first month alone, and I ain't making any promises. $2,000. Michael thought about his savings account. $4,200, 8 years of scraping together what he could. Emergency money he'd never touched. He looked down at the dog on the table. Those brown eyes were open, watching him, waiting to see what he would decide. Your life or my savings? The thought rose up ugly and honest. The dog blinked slowly. Still waiting, Michael opened his mouth. Option 2. The words left Michael's mouth before he could think them through. Dr. Miller nodded slowly. No surprise on his weathered face, no judgment either. Just acknowledgement. All right then, let's get started. That night, Michael sat on his kitchen floor at 2 a.m. The cardboard box rested against the wall, lined with old towels that smelled like the back of his closet. The dog lay inside, breathing in shallow. Uneven pulls. Neither of them slept. The window unit rattled in the bedroom. Linda's rooster clock ticked above the stove. A country station played low on the radio, Patsy Cline now. Singing about falling to pieces. Michael hadn't turned it off. Couldn't remember the last time he'd sat in true silence. I don't even like dogs. His voice sounded strange in the dark kitchen. Rusty, like a gate that hadn't been opened in years. Just so we're clear on that, the dog's eyes caught the faint light from the stove hood. Watching. And I'm not doing this because I'm some kind of saint. I'm not... The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and fell quiet. I don't know why I'm doing this. The dog shifted, just slightly. Its head moved closer to the edge of the box, closer to where Michael's hand rested on the cracked linoleum. Not touching, just near. Michael looked down at his own hand, calloused, grease-stained, the hand of a man who fixed things for a living. He didn't reach out, but he didn't pull away either. The first week became a blur of routines Michael had never asked for and didn't understand. 5:30 each morning. Before the sun topped the tree line, he filled the bathroom sink with lukewarm water and medicated shampoo that smelled sharp and chemical. The dog stood in the basin without resisting, legs trembling from the effort of staying upright. Michael worked the solution into what remained of its fur, careful around the open sores, watching the water turn gray and pink as it swirled down the drain. The dog never flinched, even when the medicine touched raw flesh. Even when Michael's clumsy fingers pressed too hard on a wound he hadn't seen. It just stood there. Patient, like it had learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. After the bath came the ointment. Dr. Miller had given him 3 different tubes, each with instructions written in the vet's cramped handwriting. Michael dabbed them on one by one, learning the geography of this broken body. The deep scar along the jaw, the cluster of wounds on the shoulder, the place behind the torn ear where the skin had healed thick and hard. Then food, boiled chicken and rice, mashed into paste. The smell of it filled the small kitchen, steam rising from the pot on the stove. The dog wouldn't eat it first. Michael set the bowl down, waited. 5 minutes. 10. The dog just stared at it, so he sat beside the box, held the bowl, waited longer. 20 minutes passed before the dog's tongue finally touched the food. "There you go." Michael's voice came out softer than he intended. "That's it?" In the evenings, after 8 hours at the garage with grease under his nails and his shoulders aching from crawling under trucks, Michael repeated everything. Bath, medicine, food, 3 pills wrapped in chicken, twice daily, somewhere in that first week. He started talking. Hold still now. Good boy. Almost done?" Then, slowly, more. "Customer came in today, wanting me to fix his transmission for $50. $50. Michael shook his head while applying ointment to a particularly deep scar. Told him I couldn't buy the parts for that. He got all huffy about it. Some folks. I tell you." The dog watched him, listened, or seemed to. "Bobby. That's the fellow I work with. His daughter got accepted to college. First one in their whole family. He's been crowing about it all week. Can't get him to talk about anything else." Michael paused. His hand rested on the dog's bony shoulder. "I said, congratulations. First time I've said more than 2 words to him in probably 3 years. He snorted quietly. Nearly gave him a heart attack. Day 5. The dog tried to stand. Michael watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee growing cold in his hand. The animal's legs shook like loose fence posts in a wind. It pushed up, collapsed, pushed up again, fell, pushed up again. Something caught in Michael's chest. "You don't quit, do you?" The legs shook. The dog made it halfway up before its hindquarters buckled, hit the floor, lay there panting, and tried again. "Rocky!" The name came from nowhere, from that old movie Linda used to love, the one about the boxer from Philadelphia who wouldn't stay down no matter how many times he got hit. "Your name's Rocky now. Deal with it." The dog's tail moved, just a twitch, barely visible against the towel, but it was there. Week 2 brought small changes. Rocky ate without Michael sitting beside him. The raw patches began scabbing over, pink skin showing underneath. The coughing fits came less often, though they didn't disappear. And every evening when Michael's truck pulled into the driveway, Rocky was at the door, not standing, not yet, but there, watching through the screen, waiting. "Don't look at me like that." Michael dropped his keys on the counter. "Doc says you've got weeks. Maybe." Rocky's tail swept the floor. "I mean it. Don't go getting attached." The tail moved faster. Week 3. Michael opened the refrigerator. Empty egg carton. Milk gone sour. The last of the chicken had gone into Rocky's breakfast that morning. On the stove sat a pot of food. Chicken thighs and rice, simmered for an hour until soft. Enough for 3 days of dog meals. Michael stared at the empty fridge, then at the pot. He poured himself a glass of water from the tap. That was supper. The follow-up appointment came on a Thursday afternoon. Dr. Miller examined Rocky in silence, his stethoscope moving slow across the dog's chest, his fingers probing the abdomen where the tumor sat. Michael stood in the corner, arms crossed, trying not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. The vet straightened, took off his stethoscope, cleaned his glasses on his white coat. "Well, I'll be—" "What?" "The tumor." Dr. Miller looked up at Michael. "It's smaller, noticeably." The room seemed to tilt. "How is that possible?" couldn't tell you." The old vet shook his head slowly. 40 years doing this work. Seen a lot of dogs come and go, but this—" He gestured at Rocky, who sat calmly on the table. Patches of new fur had begun sprouting across his shoulders like grass after rain. "This don't make sense." "So, he's going to make it?" "I didn't say that." A note of caution crept into the vet's voice. "The infection's clearing up. Sure, the mange is responding. But that tumor smaller don't mean gone. Could turn around tomorrow. Could spread." He paused. "What exactly are you doing with this dog, Mr. Thompson?" "Nothing special. Just taking care of him." Dr. Miller studied Michael for a long moment. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep at it." He scratched Rocky behind his good ear. "Something's working." That night, Michael sat on the back steps. Rocky lay beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The crickets sang in the dry grass. A breeze carried the smell of mesquite and dust. Michael's hand found Rocky's head. The fur was still patchy, but it was there, growing. "Doc says you might make it after all." Rocky's tail thumped against the wooden step. Michael didn't answer. His hand kept moving, slow and steady. 8 years. 8 years since he'd wanted anything to survive. The thought hit him sudden and sharp. His hand stopped. Rocky turned, those brown eyes finding his face in the darkness, asking something Michael wasn't ready to answer. 4 months changed everything. Rocky stood in the backyard, head lifted toward the October sun. His legs held firm beneath him. No trembling, no collapse. Just a dog standing in the grass the way dogs were supposed to stand. The scars remained. They always would. A road map of suffering carved into his face, his shoulders, his flanks. One ear still hung ragged where something had torn it long ago. His coat had grown back in patches dark brown here, lighter tan there, bare pink skin showing through in places that would never fully heal. He would never win any prizes at a dog show. But he was alive, strong, present. Michael watched from the back steps, coffee steam curling in the cool morning air. Somewhere down the road, the Methodist church bell rang 8 times. Rocky's good ear perked toward the sound, then swiveled back to Michael, always checking, always making sure he was still there. "You're going to trip me one of these days," Michael said. Rocky's tail swept the dead leaves scattered across the yard. "I mean it." The tail moved faster. "At the garage." Bobby noticed first. "You said good morning to Mrs. Patterson." Bobby stood frozen by the tool chest, a socket wrench dangling from his grease-stained fingers. "Just walked right up and said it. No prompting or nothing." Michael tightened a spark plug, didn't look up. "People say good morning. You don't. Not in 12 years. The spark plug clicked into place. Michael reached for the next one. "And you've been whistling." Bobby's voice carried wonder, like he'd witnessed something unnatural. "Actual tunes. I heard Blue Eyes crying in the rain yesterday. People whistle. Bobby, you don't." Michael set down the wrench, met Bobby's eyes for the first time. "Things change." Bobby stared at him for a long moment or so, then a slow grin spread across his weathered face. "Well, I'll be—" He turned back to his work, shaking his head. "I'll be—" At home, the picture frame still lay face down on the TV stand. But one evening, Michael picked up a dust cloth, wiped the surface clean. His fingers brushed the frame's wooden edge. He didn't turn it over, not yet. But he dusted around it, moved it slightly to get underneath. That was something. The refrigerator held more than beer and expiring milk now. Vegetables sat in the crisper carrots, celery, a bag of spinach going soft. Michael had bought them at the Piggly Wiggly without thinking much about why. Rocky ate better than he did most days, always had. But lately, Michael had started scrambling eggs for himself in the mornings, making sandwiches that had more than just bread and bologna, cooking actual meals that required pots and pans and attention. The silence in the house felt different now. Rocky's nails clicked on the linoleum as he followed Michael from room to room. His breathing filled the quiet spaces. His presence occupied corners that had sat empty for 8 years. One evening, Michael sat on the back steps without a beer in his hand. He didn't notice the absence at first, just sat there watching the sun sink toward the tree line, Rocky warm against his leg, the smell of wood smoke drifting from a neighbor's chimney. An hour passed. His hand rested on Rocky's head, fingers moving through the uneven fur, rough patches and smooth patches, scars and new growth. No television droning inside, no alcohol softening the edges, just the evening and the quiet and the weight of another living thing pressed against him. The church bell rang in the distance. 6 o'clock. Time was... He wouldn't have noticed. Now he counted the chimes without meaning to. When Michael finally went inside, he realized he hadn't touched a drink all night. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Month 6 arrived with cooler mornings and a new rhythm to the days. Sunup walked the railroad tracks with Rocky, the same path where everything began. The dog trotted beside him now, strong and sure, occasionally veering into the tall grass to investigate some smell only he could detect. Sundown. Sit on the porch, watch the sky turn colors, let the day drain away. Michael started nodding at neighbors as they passed, not waving, that still felt like too much, but acknowledging, a small tip of the head, a brief meeting of eyes. People noticed. In a town like Cedar Creek, people always noticed. One Saturday afternoon, small footsteps pounded across the yard. Fast and light. Mr. Michael looked up from his porch chair. A girl stood at the edge of his property, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Brown pigtails, a gap where her front teeth used to be, the Hendricks kid from 3 houses down. "Can I pet your dog?" Michael's first thought was, no. Rocky's face still made grown men look away. Children pointed and whispered. But before he could speak, Rocky was already moving. Down the steps, across the brown grass, straight toward the girl. Michael tensed, started to rise. Rocky stopped 2 feet from the child, lowered his scarred head, waited. The girl's small hand reached out without hesitation, touched the ruined fur, traced one of the scars that ran along Rocky's muzzle like she was reading a story written in skin. What happened to him? He had a hard life. Before. Did it hurt? Reckon it did. The girl nodded, serious as a judge. Her fingers found Rocky's good ear and scratched behind it. Rocky's eyes half closed, his tail swayed slow and steady. "He's so pretty," the girl said. Michael blinked. Pretty. He looked at Rocky, the scars, the missing ear, the coat that would never grow back right. The same dog 5 shelters had rejected, the same dog a veterinarian had given weeks to live. "Yeah." The word came out rough, catching on something in his throat. "I reckon he is." The girl smiled wide, gap-toothed and genuine. She hugged Rocky's neck, then ran back toward her house, shouting something about supper. Michael sat back down slowly. Rocky climbed the steps and settled at his feet. Pretty. Nobody had ever called Rocky that. Nobody had looked past the damage to see what was underneath. Until this child walked up and touched him like the scars weren't even there. Michael's hand found Rocky's head. "Maybe she sees something the rest of us missed." Rocky's tail thumped once against the porch boards. That night, for the first time since the funeral, Michael dreamed of Linda. She stood in their kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window behind her. Young, healthy. The way she'd looked before the diagnosis stole everything. She didn't speak, just smiled, that crooked smile with the dimple on one side. Then she looked past him, at something over his shoulder. Michael turned to see what she was looking at. He woke before the dream finished, but Rocky was there beside the bed, watching him in the gray morning light. And Michael understood, suddenly and completely, that this was about more than saving a dog. It always had been. The convenience store parking lot baked under the afternoon sun. Michael left Rocky in the truck with the windows cracked and walked inside for a gallon of milk. 2 minutes, or maybe 3, when he stepped back out into the heat, a man stood beside his truck, mid-50s, Carhartt jacket despite the weather, work boots caked with dried mud. He was leaning close to the open window, studying what was inside. "Help you with something?" Michael's voice came out harder than he intended. The man straightened, turned. His face held something complicated curiosity twisted up with something darker underneath. "That's one heck of a dog you got there." He nodded toward Rocky. "German Shepherd, ain't it?" "Yeah." "Mind if I ask where you got him?" Michael's grip tightened on the milk jug, the plastic crinkling under his fingers. "Found him, out by the old railroad tracks." The man's expression changed. His eyes went back to Rocky, scanning the scars, the torn ear, the patches where fur refused to grow. "Those marks on his face, the way that ear's ripped up." His voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper. "This one of Miller's dogs, who, Old Man Miller, ran a place about 20 miles east of here, back toward the county line." The man pulled off his cap and ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "Sheriff's Department raided him last spring. Dog-fighting operation. Had dozens of animals out there in pens." The parking lot asphalt seemed to shift beneath Michael's boots. "Dog-fighting. Bred them for it. Trained them up mean. Made them tear each other apart while folks placed bets." The man's jaw tightened. "When the law finally closed in, word around town is he turned some loose. The ones too chewed up to fight no more. Just drove out to the middle of nowhere and dumped them like garbage." Michael looked at Rocky through the truck window. The dog sat calm and patient, watching them both with those brown eyes that had seen things no creature should ever see. "You're telling me someone did this to him on purpose? Mister, those scars ain't from accidents. That ear wasn't torn in some fence." The man shook his head slowly. "That dog was raised to kill other dogs, starved to make him mean, beat to make him tough, then thrown out like trash when he couldn't do it no more." The milk jug slipped. Michael caught it before it hit the ground. "Surprised the poor thing's still breathing. Tell you the truth." The man put his cap back on, tugging the brim low. "Most of them don't make it. Not after what Miller put them through." He walked away across the cracked asphalt, boots scuffing against the pavement. Michael stood alone in the parking lot, the Texas sun pressed down on his shoulders. Heat shimmered off the blacktop in waves. Rocky watched him through the window, patient, trusting. Those same brown eyes that had looked up at him from the tall grass 7 months ago. Michael got in the truck, drove home in silence. That night, he couldn't sit still. He paced the small living room, Rocky's eyes following him back and forth. The rooster clock ticked on the wall. The radio played low some old hymn his mother used to hum, but he couldn't hear it over the noise in his own head. Trained to kill. Starved. Beat. Thrown away. He stopped at the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass. His own reflection stared back at him. A 52-year-old man with tired eyes and a week's worth of stubble. A man who'd almost kept walking that day by the railroad tracks. You wanted to leave him there. The thought hit like a fist to the gut. He'd told himself it wasn't his problem, told himself someone else would handle it, told himself he didn't care about anything anymore, and that was just fine. Michael turned from the window. Rocky lay on his blanket in the corner, head up, watching. This dog beaten, starved, tortured, abandoned, had survived things that would have broken any living creature, had been thrown away by humans again and again, had been left to die alone in a field of dead grass. And still, when Michael found him, Rocky had looked up with patient eyes, still willing to trust, still hoping, after everything, that maybe this time would be different. And you almost proved him right to quit hoping. Michael's hands started to shake. He thought about the last 8 years, the closed doors, the avoided conversations, the picture frame lying face down because looking at Linda's smile hurt too much, the way he'd walled himself off from every living soul in Cedar Creek because caring about anything meant risking loss. He'd turned himself into a ghost, a hollow man walking through hollow days. Linda would have stopped for that dog without thinking twice. She would have scooped him up and carried him home and nursed him back to health and never once considered leaving him in that field. But you did. You thought about it. You wanted to. The shame hit him then. Not sadness. Something worse, something that crawled up from his belly and wrapped around his throat. He'd spent 8 years feeling sorry for himself. 8 years hiding from life because his wife had died. 8 years acting like he was the one who'd suffered most in this world. And all that time, creatures like Rocky were being starved and beaten and left for dead. And men like Michael were walking past them. He sank down onto the floor, back against the wall. His chest heaved. His eyes burned. Rocky rose from his blanket, crossed the room, sat down beside Michael, close enough that their shoulders touched. No licking, no whimpering, just presence. Michael's hand found the scarred fur, gripped it tight. The first sound that escaped his throat surprised him, raw, broken, a noise he hadn't made since he'd held Linda's hand and felt her fingers go slack. He didn't try to stop it. The tears came hot and angry, releasing something that had been locked away so long he'd forgotten it was there. Rocky pressed closer, laid his heavy head on Michael's knee. 2 broken creatures on a kitchen floor in the dark, and somewhere in the wreckage, a question began to form. If this dog could survive all that and still trust what was Michael's excuse, morning light found Michael still on the kitchen floor. His back ached from sleeping against the cabinet. His eyes felt raw and swollen, like he'd rubbed sand into them. Rocky lay beside him, head resting on Michael's thigh, watching the sunrise paint squares of gold across the linoleum. Michael didn't move, just sat there, letting the night drain away. Something had broken loose in the darkness, something heavy and hard that he'd been carrying so long it had become part of him. Now it lay in pieces around him, and he didn't know what was left underneath. But the world looked different this morning. Sharper somehow, like someone had wiped a film off his eyes that he hadn't known was there. Rocky stirred, lifted his scarred head. Those brown eyes found Michael's face. "Yeah." Michael's voice came out rough as gravel. "I know." He stood slowly, his knees cracked, his hip complained. 52 years of living making themselves heard. The house waited around him, same walls, same furniture, same dust in the corners. But Michael moved through it differently now. He stopped in front of the TV stand. The picture frame lay where it had always lain, face down. Hidden. His hand reached out, trembled slightly. He picked it up, turned it over. Linda smiled at him from behind the glass. Their wedding day, 23 years ago now. She wore white lace and that crooked grin he'd fallen in love with at first sight. The dimple in her left cheek caught the light. Michael's thumb traced the edge of the frame. "Hey, sweetheart." Just that. 2 words, barely a whisper. Rocky padded up beside him, sat down, looked at the photograph. "That's Linda." Michael's voice cracked on her name. "She would have liked you something fierce." The dog's tail moved once, gentle against the floor. Michael set the frame upright on the stand, facing outward, where it belonged. 8 years of hiding, and all it took was deciding to stop. He walked to the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer. The wedding band sat where he'd left it. White gold, delicate, Linda's ring that he'd slipped off her finger at the funeral home because he couldn't bear to let them bury it with her. Michael picked it up, held it between his fingers. The metal caught the morning light. He found an old chain in his dresser, tarnished silver. His father's chain that had sat unused for 20 years. He threaded the ring onto it, fastened it around his neck. The ring settled against his chest, close to his heart. Rocky stood in the doorway, watching. "She was here the whole time," Michael said quietly. "I just couldn't look." He walked past Rocky into the kitchen. "Put coffee on." The old percolator gurgled and hissed, filling the small room with a smell that reminded him of Sunday mornings when Linda would make pancakes and they'd eat on the back porch, watching the birds. When had he stopped noticing things like that? The coffee finished, Michael poured a cup. Black, no sugar, same as always. But he carried it outside instead of drinking it at the sink. Rocky followed. They sat on the back steps together. The October morning hung cool and crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the road. Dew sparkled on the grass. A mockingbird sang from the oak tree by the fence. Mrs. Roberts walked past on the sidewalk. 80 years old, white hair pulled back, walking her morning constitutional same as she'd done for decades. She'd been Linda's friend, had brought casseroles after the funeral that Michael had never touched. Normally, he would have looked away, pretended not to see her. Today, he raised his hand. "Morning, Mrs. Roberts." She stopped, turned. Her eyes widened behind her thick glasses. "Why, good morning. Michael." A slow smile spread across her weathered face. "That dog of yours is looking good these days. He's a fighter. Takes one to know one." She nodded once, then continued on her way, her cane tapping steady against the sidewalk. Michael watched her go. Takes one to know one. His hand found Rocky's head, the familiar texture of scarred skin and patchy fur. "She might be onto something, boy." Rocky leaned into the touch. Solid, warm, alive. Michael thought about the railroad tracks, about that moment when he'd turned to walk away, about the choice he'd made without understanding why. He hadn't saved Rocky because he was a good man. He hadn't done it out of kindness or compassion or any noble impulse. He'd done it because something inside him, some stubborn, buried piece that he'd tried to kill off for 8 years, had refused to let him walk away. The same piece that had loved Linda, the same piece that had grieved when she died, the same piece he'd been running from ever since. Rocky hadn't needed saving. Not really. That dog had survived horrors that should have destroyed him, had kept breathing, kept fighting, kept hoping, through things Michael couldn't imagine. No, Rocky hadn't needed Michael to rescue him. Michael had needed Rocky. Every bath, every meal, every pill wrapped in chicken he'd been learning to care for something again. Every evening on these steps. Every walk along those tracks he'd been remembering how to be present in his own life. Rocky had shown him what he'd forgotten, that broken things could mend, that damaged creatures could heal, that giving up wasn't the only choice. The ring pressed warm against Michael's chest. Linda had always said he was better than he believed. Maybe she'd been right all along. 1 year later, Saturday afternoon. The Texas sun hung low in a sky streaked with orange and pink. The heat had finally broken, giving way to the kind of autumn evening that made people sit on porches and remember why they loved this land. Michael sat on the back steps, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Not beer, hadn't touched the stuff in months. Couldn't say exactly when he'd stopped wanting it. Rocky lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, tail thumping a lazy rhythm against the wooden planks. His coat had filled in as much as it ever would patches of brown and tan interrupted by the scars that would never fade. The torn ear still hung ragged. The marks on his face still told their story. But his eyes were clear, his breathing was easy, and he never strayed far from Michael's side. Down the road, the Methodist church bell rang 5 times. Rocky's good ear swiveled toward the sound, then back. Footsteps on the sidewalk, small and fast. Mr. Michael, Mr. Michael. Emma Hendricks came running across the yard, pigtails flying behind her. She was 8 now, missing 2 teeth instead of 1. Behind her bounded a golden Labrador puppy, all paws and ears and clumsy enthusiasm. Look, Mama finally said yes. The puppy spotted Rocky and charged toward him without an ounce of fear. Rocky lifted his head, watched the ball of gold fur scramble up the steps, and held perfectly still as the puppy climbed all over him, licking his scarred muzzle and tugging at his good ear. Michael watched the 2 dogs. The contrast couldn't have been sharper, one golden and perfect, one marked by years of cruelty. Together on his porch like it was the most natural thing in the world? What's his name? Sunshine? Emma beamed. Because he makes everything brighter. That's a fine name. Mama says Rocky is the bravest dog in the whole town. Emma crouched down and scratched behind Rocky's torn ear. Because he kept going when everybody else gave up on him. Michael's hand found the ring beneath his shirt, warm metal against his chest. Your mama's a smart woman. She says you're brave too. Emma looked up at him with that 8-year-old certainty that hadn't learned to doubt itself yet. Because you took him home when nobody else would. Michael didn't answer, just watched Rocky endure the puppy's attention with infinite patience. Brave. He'd never thought of it that way. Never saw himself as anything but a man who'd made a choice in a field of tall grass. But maybe that was what brave looked like. Not grand gestures, not dramatic rescues, just deciding to turn around when everything inside you wanted to keep walking. Emma gathered up Sunshine and ran back toward her house. Hollering something about supper, Michael stood. His knees popped. 53 years weren't kind to joints. His father used to say, "Come on, boy, let's take a walk." Rocky rose immediately, tail wagging, ready. They took the familiar path. Down Mulberry Lane, past Bucky's Diner, where the old-timers waved through the window, out toward the railroad tracks that cut through the edge of town. The rails hadn't changed, still rusted, still abandoned, weeds still pushing through the rotted ties. But Michael walked differently here now. His shoulders sat easier, his stride stretched longer. Rocky trotted beside him, occasionally veering into the grass to investigate some smell, always circling back. They stopped at the spot, the shallow depression in the earth where Michael had found a dying dog 14 months ago. The grass had grown back, green shoots mixed with the brown, life returning to a place that had almost witnessed death. Michael looked down at the ground, then at Rocky. "You remember this place?" Rocky's nose worked the air. His ears perked forward. "I almost left you here." Michael's voice came soft, honest. "Almost convinced myself it wasn't my business." A breeze stirred the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew a freight line, miles away. "Been thinking about that a lot, about why I turned around." Rocky sat, watching, patient as always. "Reckon I'll never know for sure." He crouched down, hand finding the familiar texture of scarred fur. "But I'm glad I did." Rocky's tail swept the dirt. Michael stood, looked out at the horizon where the sun was sinking into bands of purple and gold. "Let's go home." They walked back along the tracks, two figures casting long shadows in the evening light, man and dog, both scarred, both healing. The mobile home came into view, faded blue siding, wooden steps, a light glowing yellow in the kitchen window where Linda's rooster clock still ticked above the stove. Inside, her picture sat on the TV stand, facing outward, smiling. Michael filled Rocky's bowl, set it on the floor, watched the dog eat with the steady appetite of the healthy. Then he made his own supper, scrambled eggs and toast. Nothing fancy, but real. They ate together in the quiet kitchen, man at the table, dog at his feet. The church bells rang in the distance. 6 o'clock. Michael washed his plate, dried it, put it away. Rocky waited by the back door. All right. They sat on the porch steps, side by side, watching the stars come out one by one over Texas. Michael's hand rested on Rocky's head, the ring pressed warm against his chest. No words needed, just two souls who had found each other in a field of tall grass, still here, still breathing, still together. There's a quiet that comes after a story like this. Something tender sits in the chest, not asking to be named or explained. Just felt? Many of us have walked past something that needed us. Many of us have carried the weight of almost walking away. Some of us have spent years with a photograph turned face down, a drawer we couldn't open, a memory too heavy to hold but impossible to let go. Perhaps you've loved something the world dismissed. Perhaps you've been the one dismissed. Perhaps you know what it feels like to sit on a porch at evening time, one hand resting on something warm and breathing, wondering how you got here and grateful that you did. It's all right if this story stirred something that doesn't have a name. Not everything needs to be understood. Some things just need to be felt and then allowed to rest. The story of Michael and Rocky doesn't end with answers. It ends with two beings sitting together, watching stars appear. That's enough. Sometimes presence is the only resolution we need. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.